Hi there, this is Scott Bradfield. Welcome to the bathtub. We're doing a fairly brief one this week about a writer who I sort of discovered in order to do a review. My favorite thing about reviewing is reading writers I would never have read and paying them attention, because normally we don't pay attention to. We have so much to pay attention to. You have a kind of arbitrary writer put in your face, and you just pay attention to them. And it's a great opportunity to do it and get paid. So I was lucky enough to do, I'll post a link to it below, for the LA Times, Eve Babitz. And Eve Babitz is a Southern California writer, and she was an artist, and she designed album covers for like Buffalo Springfield and some of those people in the 60s as an occasion for this book called Hollywood's Eve, which is a play off an Eve Babitz book called Eve's Hollywood, and it's by, I can say her name wrong, Lily Anolik, possibly, and it is a short biography of this woman named Eve Babitz, who's still alive, who is not I wouldn't call her a great writer or even a significant writer, but she wrote some good books, and she's a good writer, and she's an interesting writer, particularly when it comes to Southern California. Her classic book, using that term a bit loosely, but the one that she's best known by is Slow Days, Fast Company, which has been reissued in the past few years by NYRB Press and has gotten a lot of attention and seems to be selling fairly well and reinvigorating interest in Eve Babitz. She's really an interesting person and a good writer. As a Southern California writer, what's most fun about Eve Babitz is she's an unapologetic, shallow Southern Californian. And I mean shallow with the air quotes, in the sense that she was, where's one of the pictures? She liked to show off that she had a kind of voluptuous figure. She was an attractive woman. Her first flirtation with fame was she played chess naked with the great surrealist painter Marcel Duchamp at the Pasadena art show. And this is back in the 60s, when Los Angeles was always considered, and less so today, as the kind of the pit of art. It was just all junk and movies and crap culture. And Babitz was raised in Southern California by a very intelligent couple of parents. The mother was a real wild character who, I think she started off in the Midwest somewhere and ended up in the West Coast. And her godfather was Igor Stravinsky. She was raised around people who were kind of Hollywood types and kind of famous literary arty types. She knew people like Kenneth Patchett as a child, and a lot of famous people were coming and going in her home. So she had an interesting life. She had a lot of opportunities. Her father was a musician for a film orchestra, an orchestra that made film music. So that was her background. She was raised a well-off kid. She went to Hollywood High. She had a nice life, and there's a sort of celebration of the bullshit of what's considered bullshit of LA life, which is people looking nice and having nice cars and running around getting drunk and going to parties and taking too many drugs. There's a bit of irony in it when you read Babitz. So she's not. You might think she's glorifying that whole world. She's not entirely, but she's not ashamed of it. I would say she's an unashamed writer. She's often compared as kind of the antithesis of Joan Didion. We all know and love and sometimes get tired of Joan Didion, and she was one of the really interesting writers in the 60s and 70s. One of the first writers who, for me, as a young man, showed that you could write about LA and Southern California and California itself, because we were often raised to think it was a shallow, pointless place that didn't have any meaning. It was just a ludicrous place. And Didion wrote in good, clear prose, and she wrote well about Southern California, and she kind of had a despondent nature about Southern California. So I remember her characters are kind of lying around pools, getting stoned, and reflecting on the meaninglessness of existence. Eve Babitz's characters are partying and discoing and having sex in the cab and having threesomes at home and running around, taking too many drugs and having a good time. And she's not ashamed of it, and she writes very well. She's got a very funny sense of humor. It's very light and very quick reading, this book. Her other book that's come out by NYRB is this called Eve's Hollywood, which is a lot of stories and journalism, and that's more of a mixed bag. But I would start with this book here, Slow Days, Fast Company, and I would read that long before I read the biography of her. It's a memoir, so it's not a novel. It's supposed to be about her life. It's clearly taking liberties with it. She kind of glories in all the stuff we're not supposed to glory in. So we mentioned drugs, sex, having a good time, being attractive. She's very unashamed. She likes to tell everyone how attractive she is. As a person, I mentioned her in the piece as a kind of a Forrest Gump in a miniskirt, just because everywhere she goes, she's meeting famous people. So it's Marcel Duchamp. She's supposedly the person who told Steve Martin to wear the white suit. There's just so many stories about her being in these places. There's one story where she goes to see, I can't forget the famous rock singer who died in the pool, Janis Joplin. Sorry, I'm completely losing my brain. Janis Joplin, who died in the pool, in the swimming pool, on overdose on drugs. And I guess according to Babitz, she went to see her a few days before when she was crashed out in the pool before she died. So it's like she's always everywhere where things are happening. And she seems to like that about her life. I'll just give you a quick passage. One of the things she enjoys and she's unashamed about is, again, women, society, gossiping, just hanging around. A typically funny piece in this is on, it's a chapter called Bad Day at Palm Springs. And she's throwing her friends at this. She's attracted to this woman named Nikki. And she says, "If you're wondering why I was tossing my friends at Nikki like fish, you're probably a person who has no tendency for society and who does not like to spend hours on the phone reliving parties. You do not like to find things out from women. One afternoon, I was sitting on a veranda at a party with about 6 women, and the information that was exchanged, commonly called gossip, was enough to run the world for months. Suddenly a hush fell over the women, and I looked around, and there was a man. The women slid masks over their faces. The subject changed. The man said, 'What are all you girls doing out here? Come in and join the party.' And the summit conference was over." Again, the fact that there's this kind of alternate world where the real stuff is happening, the men think that all this stuff is happening inside. These girls they think people think they're just being silly and superficial and just getting drunk and laughing, but they're actually kind of running the world. It's almost, we talked about R.A. Lafferty. It almost sounds like an R.A. Lafferty story. This is a good bathtub read. It's different. It's funny. It'll make you laugh. It's not despondent. If you do love L.A., like many of us do, then this is sort of the antidote. It's often referred to as the antidote to Joan Didion. Joan Didion's still great, but you might like this. She has a few other books as well, but start with Slow Days, Fast Company. It's a good 2 or 3 days in the bathtub. Okay, see you soon.